Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good Tavach, a good week, and a good Yom Tov. Today was Yud Shevat, the 74th Yehilula Histalkus of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the beginning of the Nesias and leadership of the Rebbe. So we'll begin speaking about that, and then we'll move over to the regular scheduled program of the continuing journey in the life-changing Sefer Tanya. This program is made possible by Rena Lights LLC, and it is in honor memory of Rabbi Yosef Halevi Weinberg Olav Hashalom, Rabbi Moshe Pinchas HaKoyen Katz Olav Hashalom, Rabbi Yael HaKoyen Khan Olav Hashalom, and it is in schus and merit of Rabbi Zev Yecheskel HaKoyen and Risha Katz La'edich Yomim V'Shanim Tevis for many long, healthy years. Being that it's Yud Shevat, as I said, let's begin with that. So Yud Shevat was Shabbos Parsha Boy in Tov Shin Yud. The year was 1950. Shabbos morning, the sad news came that the Frierdiker Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, passed away. By Chassidim, there's always the expression, "V'zarach hashemesh," or "Bo hashemesh," "V'zarach hashemesh." The sun sets and the sun rises, so immediately it's considered the next Rebbe, the son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe, would be called, at the time it was called Ramash, would become the seventh Rebbe. Officially, the Rebbe assumed leadership a year later, especially with the saying and the official delivery of the Maimer Bosser Legani in Tovshin Yud Aleph, 1951. So how do Chassidim celebrate a day like that? How do they recognize a day like that, I should say? At the time, it wasn't a celebration, it was a sad day. But still, over the years, a yahrzeit becomes, as he explains in the Geras HaKedesh, a day that is considered the day when the neshama goes up l'mayla, as he explains, to the highest levels, and is mamshech below brachas to all its students, all the tzaddik students, and people who receive from him. And Peil Yeshua's Bekerev Haaretz. It affects Yeshua's salvations, redemptions, Bekerev Haaretz, even in the depths of the earth. As he explains in the Geras HaKedesh and Tanya, Simach Chav Zayin and Simach Chav Ches, the power of a Yemes Talkus. That's when the Maisa and Aveda of that tzaddik all gathers together, elevates, and draws down blessings below. So how do we honor a day like that? So of course, it's by committing to learning the Torah and fulfilling the instructions and guidelines of the Rebbe. Ashehirona midrachav, what we follow his paths. V'yelchu v'nelcha berchesov. We follow his guidelines and his paths. So in this situation, in Yud Shevat, we actually have a maimer, the maimer that was published that year, Tov Shin Yud. So Kuntresim would come out each week, or during special Shabbosim and special days. So a Maimer, Bosser Legani, was actually published that Shabbos, Parsha Boy, Tov Shin Yud. And that became the Maimer that the Rebbe began saying when he assumed leadership the year later, Tov Shin Yud Aleph. That Maimer consists of 20 chapters, and these 20 chapters, each year the Rebbe would say and explain one of the chapters. So it went for 20 years till Tov Shin Lamed, 1970, and then in 1971 the Rebbe began the cycle again. So by Chassidim, it became that Bosser Legani is learned, especially the chapter that corresponds with that year. This year would be chapter 14. So just a little background and interesting. When Chassidim were learning the Maimer that Shabbos morning in Shul, Friday night I should say, when they were learning it Friday night, the Stalkus was Shabbos morning, they noticed that in the Pesach Dover, in the introduction to the Maimer, the word Shlita was missing a Yud. It said Shin Lamed Tes Aleph. You write Shin Lamed Yud Tes Aleph. Sheyechi Lom Tevus Aruchis, Yom Tev Maruchim. The Yud was missing. People noticed it. The next morning, it became more clear what was the story. And interesting, it's Yud. So the day is Yud Shevat. The year was Tov Shin Yud. The Rosh Tevis of the Frierdiker Rebbe is Yud Yud, Yosef Yitzchak. And it's known, especially in the last year, when the Frierdiker Rebbe would sign his letters, so the Yud of Yitzchak, he made bolder and bolder, like Sav Ashuris. Usually you write a Yud, you write a little dot. But he would actually make, like you write in a Sefer Torah, with a center, and he filled it in with a Kaitz Lamaila, Kaitz Lamata. The Rebbe wrote in a note to someone, we don't know the reason. But later in Tov Shin Nun, 40 years from Yud Shvat, the Rebbe explained that Yud represents the Frierdiker Rebbe's Aveda, so it's the Rosh Tevis of his name. The year Yud Shvat is Yom HaYortz, is Zastalkus, is Lula. Tov Shin Yud, Yud represents Chochmah Bittel. So everything is Ashgacha, El Yen. And indeed, his Nesias was in tens. He began his Nesias also in a round year, 1920, Tafresh Pei. So from Tafresh Pei to Tafresh Sadik to Tov Shin to Tov Shin Yud, exact 30 years. Again, in a cycle of tens, 3 tens. Number 10, it says in Sfarim, is a Misper HaSholem, is the full-rounded number, the complete number. That's what you find. 10 is a minyan. Everything in number of 10, 100, 1,000. So it's just interesting. So you have a tzaddik, a Rebbe, that his whole Nesias was around the number 10 and the letter Yud. And indeed, that was the Aveda of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Aveda of Mesidus Nefesh. Yud represents Mesidus Nefesh. There's no substance of its own. The letter Hey has substance. A letter Yud is just the bare minimum, the Nekud. The Nekudis habitl in the language of Chassidus. And that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe embodied and personified. Total bitl. Went through terrible times. Was arrested, was tortured, physically, in every possible way. And yet he came out stronger, and he continued to maintain and rebuilt Chabad from Lubavitch, from the Shtetl Lubavitch where he was born, all the way going through Europe, and then finally coming to the United States in 1940, also in a round year, 1940, Tov Shin, and led the movement for 10 years until Tov Shin Yud, until his son-in-law, the Rebbe, continued his work. So on a day like this, we honor that power, the power of Mesidus Nefesh, the power of the Yud. We try to incorporate in our personal lives that type of bittel. So an interesting expression in my Sefer Mamorim Yiddish, the Frierdiker Rebbe teaches Koyach HaBittel in Yiddish. He says, Bittel teaches Übergegebenkeit, devotion, dedication, commitment. Koyach HaBittel, the Kraft von Übergegebenkeit. It's an interesting translation. Usually we translate bittel, I mean, this literal is nullification. In this case, it's a positive nullification. Suspending yourself in order to absorb something greater than yourself. That's bittel. But the craft of devotion, dedication to something greater than yourself, which is the inyan of bittel of Yud. Yosef, the first Yosef in the Torah, was also an embodiment of that. As we know, he was in Mitzrayim, in Eretz Haaretz, in a depraved land, and yet he maintained and preserved his integrity, which was a big challenge. It's one thing to be a shepherd and live in a more spiritual environment, insulated and immunized from the material world around you, but to live in the belly of the beast, so to speak, in the mouth of the abyss in Eretz Haaretz, and maintain his connection to the Eibishter, that requires a tremendous level of bittul. And the Rebbe explains in many places how the Frierdiker Rebbe represented that same idea as Yosef did back in Mitzrayim. He also explains why, it says in the end of Pasha Vayechi, Yosem Yosef, the Odin b'Mitzrayim, Yaakov was taken back to Eretz Yisrael and was buried in the Maris HaMachpelah. Yosef belongs with the people in Mitzrayim to give them hope, to give them the promise that we will ultimately leave this God-forsaken place. So that Somis Yosef that remained within Mitzrayim was a form of comforting, consolation. And the Rebbe says the same thing. The Frierdiker Rebbe didn't ask to be taken to Eretz Yisrael. He's here in Golus in America, where the oil is, to give us strength that we will all march out of Golus. So it's again Yosef in Golus with us, giving us the strength. Like it says about the Yud. That spark, that bittul comes into the world below and transforms it, which was the Aveda of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Especially through the difficult times, first under the communists, then in Nazi Europe, and then finally the apathy and the difficulties of assimilated America to come to say America is not different. At the same time, Yud Shvat is also the beginning of the Nesius of the Rebbe. Beginning of a Nesius, Rebbe demonstrates, as the Rebbe says in his Maimer Bos Legani, Tavshin Yud Aleph, that this is the Deir HaShvi. The Maimer talks about the seventh generation. Moshe was the seventh generation from Avram. And he accomplished V'shachanti B'seichem, to bring the Shekhinah down below. So the same idea is that now, in our generation, the seventh generation from the Alter Rebbe, will bring the Shekhinah below. This is the day that will bring the Geula. And that indeed is the theme of the Rebbe's entire leadership. And the theme of Bos Legani. The 20 chapters all talk about transforming the world, transforming the animal soul, transforming the sheker into keresh, into the kroshim of the Mishkan, to make a shveshchanti b'seichem, the shtus of l'umazeh, atzei shitim, the insanity of materialism, and turning it into a holy insanity, shtus de kedusha. When the Maimer was first delivered, was Tafresh Pei Gimel, 1923, Parsha Boyim B'Shalach. So Frierdiker Rebbe said then that's a Balabat Shemaimer, Bos Legani. And he explains what he meant. Balabat teaches us how to become a balabos over your nefesh habamis. We're learning in Tanya this. The Melchama, the war between the divine soul and the animal soul. Nefesh halikis, nefesh habamis. And the Maimer, Bos Legani, the last Maimer published from the Frierdiker Rebbe, the first Maimer delivered by the Rebbe, its theme is how to become a balabos. In other words, to control your animal soul instead of it controlling you. And we're actually learning in chapter 17, which we'll go over shortly, about the power that even though by the Shoim is Libam, by the Shoim is Rishusam, is Bereshus Libam, they're controlled by their hearts. By Tzadikim, Libam Bereshusam, they control their hearts. The Beinani, Moyach Shal Talav, he's able to control his heart, not naturally, but through his effort. So become a balabos over your nefesh habamis. And the central theme of Bos Legani is how you do that. How you take yourself and make yourself into Odom Kiyakim become Korban Hashem, like in the Mishkan, we each have to become a Mishkan to Hashem. You take your animal soul, you bring it as an offering. Odom Kiyakim become Korban Hashem. Mina Behema, from the Nefesh Habamis. And you transform the sheker, the falsity, the duplicity, and the deceptiveness of this false world, you're transforming it into kroshim, to kesher and keresh, become a divine home, a divine abode where God rests. And he goes through that. That's done by Tzivis Hashem, the soldiers of Hashem, Eden. And for that, I mean, in the Sachan of this war, Mizvaz B'Za'etzes, the king, splurges all his treasures, even the most hidden ones, to overcome the enemy, because Midas HaNetzachim, to win over the enemy, reaches the deepest part of the soul, higher than all other faculties. And then he explains, as we're learning to get to chapter 14, and what is that? Lamaila? That's Eid Ein Sof, Lamata, Lamaila, Lamaila, Aden Ketz, Lamata, Mata, Aden Tachlis. That Eid Ein Sof is given to us as a gift. Even Lamata, Mata, Aden Tachlis, even in the lowest levels, as he explains in chapter 14. Even in the Shol Tachas, even in the lowest level, is Hincha, as the Pasuk says in Tehillim. Lamata mata aden tachlis. So even in Klippas, and even in Eved Tzene, and even in the most darkest places, we always have an unscathed, I would go even deeper, not just unscathed, untouched, a pure Eid Ein Sof, as he explains in the Maimon, that the Eid Ein Sof remains intact, even if it's concealed in the lowest places. So we know we have these resources to overcome any challenge. Then in the later chapters he talks that even deeper than that is the Oitzer. Once you go down all the way below, you reveal the Eitzer, which comes from the Helam Ha'atzmi, from the concealed highest divine levels that are even beyond revelation. That's the treasures and the resources we're given to deal with the battles of this world. So the whole Maimer, Basel Gani, is essentially empowerment, giving us the strength to deal with all the challenges and all the obstacles in our lives. And not only will we overcome them, not only do we have the divine energy here in this world, but Dafke here, in the Yesh Lamata, Dafke here, in this Helam, we have Etzem itself, the Etzem itself, the core power itself, so we can achieve and create a Dira Leyes Baruch Leila Atzmuse, to make a home for the Etzem of godliness in this world. So what more message is appropriate today when we're fighting battles in Eretz Yisrael and all types of battles? So we know we have all the resources, all the treasures, all the strengths. No matter what challenge you have, whether it's personal, collective, the Eid Ein Sof is with you. And furthermore, the Lamata Mata Aden Tachlis, and furthermore, the Eid Ein Sof of Lamai Lamai Aden Ketz, and even deeper than Eid, the Helam itself is created by the Eibishter. That gives us tremendous keiches to deal with any challenge we have. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, as I said before, personified that. That even in the darkest moments, he did not give up. On the contrary, he stood strong and he prevailed. So we have total confidence that we shall prevail. This is some messages from Yud Shvat connected to each one of us. So every year, Yud Shvat, we renew this commitment, and we have a job to do. We are the arms and legs and the mouthpiece that we have to carry on. The Aved of Yafutzu Meinesecha, we're in Chutza, in Tachtenim, in the lowest levels. Chutza Shein Chutza Memena, to bring Chassidus, to bring Torah, to bring mitzvahs, tzedek and yesher, to transform this world and make it into Adira B'Tachtenim V'Shachanti B'Seicham, the mission of the seventh generation. In that spirit, one of the ways we do so is we learn Tanya, Torah Shebiksav of Chassidus. And that's what this program is dedicated to week after week, the learning of Tanya. So let's now move over to the second part of this program. We're up to Tanya in chapter 17. And fitting to what we're talking about, the Tanya is built on the Posik, as the Alter Rebbe writes on the Sharblat, on the cover page. That's miyusad on the Posik, Ki korev elecha dover me'ed beficha ubelvavcha la'asese. Eichu korev me'ed. So indeed, in chapter Yud Zayin, that's what he goes to. It's the first time he comes and brings the posuk. It says, how do we understand that? So to speak, that everyone has control over, so it's accessible. Say action, we all behaviorally can do what has to be done. We have to just want to. But bilvavcha is neged achush shalanu. Someone pointed out, I was looking for the right word. Neged achush, it means it goes against our nature. Someone told me maybe it means counterintuitive. But neged achush shalanu means it's not in the spirit of what we know, like he says, to control your heart, your emotions. Emotions are desire the pleasures of this world. We're tempted by that all the time. She'ein korev meid adavar lahapich libim. It's not easy, Korev, and more than that, Korev Me'ed, to transform the heart from the desires of this world to love God in a true way. So why does the pasuk says Korev Elecha Dover Me'ed Am B'Levavcha? And the Alter Rebbe answers. Well, he first intensifies the question. Even Yira, he says, is not a milsa zutra, says not a small matter for Shorav. And then we say tzadikim dafka libam bereshusam. And here we're saying b'lebavcha. And ateidah hinitzchis, which means it's not just for the time of Moshe, it's not just for some people, for all people. So how can we say korev elecha dover me'od elecha to every person? So Alter Rebbe answers, Elo, that by the word lasese, the word expression is beficha ubelvavcha lasese. There's no vav. So the belvavcha lasese, you have the capacity, maybe not to reach a fiery a fiery passionate love. There's a level of a beini that can reach that too. But even if you can't reach a fiery passion, what he calls libe, bizgalus libe, berish kirish be'esh, with a fiery flame, you still can reach ru'usad libe shebetalumas lev, a person, every person, even someone that cannot stimulate and arouse that level of a fiery passion and love for Hashem, can at least contemplate. The Ava Musateris is his mind, and the Talumis Libe to feel that it's appropriate to love God. It's fitting. Ye osa, like he said. It's fitting. You appreciate it. So sometimes you can appreciate it and you fully feel it. Sometimes you don't fully feel the passion, but your heart and mind tell you that's the right thing to do. And bottom line is it leads you to actions. So it's lavavcha, so that everyone can reach. Bilvavcha la'asese, a lavavcha that brings you to actions, not due to hergel, because it's due to teva, due to your nature, or hergel nasa teva, second nature, but it's due to your effort. The dover zen korav made v'nakel l'chol odam asher yesh le'meir b'katkode. This is something that's korav made to every person who has a mind. To use his mind to understand and appreciate, ki moiche b'reshusei. See, even though you said the libay is only b'reshus of tzaddikim, but moiche is in the power of each individual. The yochel is beinu b'kechol asher yachpetz. And he can contemplate as much as he does at once. And when he contemplates on it, that will give birth, at least in his mind. He appreciates the value, the Avel Hashem, the Dofka Bebikim Mitzresav V'serose. At least to the effect that it affects your action, which is Zerkal Adam. That's the main thing, Hayem Lasesam. The main thing is action. Like we learned, the mind naturally and by birth inherently has the ability to control the left side of the heart, and on his mouth and his speaking, meaning dibur, his speech, and all the evonim shehem klei hamaisa, his actions. So you have all things, all in his reach. So there's a level of Abeni Vavcha, you could say, he literally brings his galus libe. Like he said in the beginning of the last chapter, that there are people that can come to that level. But even Misha Ein Yode Masegas still can come to Talumas Libe. Like we learned in the previous chapter 16. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mitzarefes, Machshava Teva HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzarfe L'maisa. So the Eibishter compensates for the rest. Bottom line is you have access to the Vavcha. So what do we see here? That there's two levels. It's actually three levels, you can say. There's the tzaddik who libe bereshuse. He's already transformed himself. He does not need this work of contemplating and taming and controlling the animal soul, because he's eliminated the animal soul. He naturally loves God. Libe bereshuse. So his heart, what is it passionate for? Godliness. Then there's the level of the Beinani who does not have that naturally. He's not conquered his animal soul. But he has Moyach Shal Talev, to the point that he can actually arouse and awaken through his contemplation a full love, a fiery passion for love, his Galus Libe. So there too, we don't need the Chiddush of Levavcha. He also has Levavcha. Not quite like a tzaddik, but Levavcha. Then comes the Beinani, who may not have Misha in Yodei Masagas. He can't create the fiery passion, but Levavcha La'asese, for that he can do. And as we learned and discussed last week, the Tzemach Tzeddik's explanation, in addition, whether it's an additional explanation or it goes hand in hand, that beficha, that through learning Torah, that gives you what to contemplate on and what to be me'ered, that in turn affects B'levavcha La'asese. So the pasuk Korev Elecha Dover Me'ed Beficha Ubelvavcha is fitting. He answered the question. But now, what about the fact that there's people, we know there's a level of a Rasha. And the Chazal, the same Chazal that spoke before about the Tzaddik, it says by the Rasha, it says, the same Chazal says, Sharashoyim him b'reshus libam. That the Rashayim, they are controlled by their hearts. So what do you do with them? How do they fit into here? And additionally, the pasuk is talking about everybody. Korev Elecha Adover Me'ed, also about a Rasha. So Alter Rebbe is now going to address that. So let's learn inside. So he says like this. That which we said that you can generate, it's in your power to generate enough love to observe mitzvahs. No, it's bilvavcha that brings to la seisei. This is true, and that's within reach. Very much within reach. For every person, but there's an exception. Im loy mishu Rasha be'emes. This is in all cases, unless, except if he's a real Rasha be'emes. Kamay marazal, shar shoymim b'reshus libo. So now we're coming to another level. The tzaddik controls his heart, naturally, completely. The beini controls his heart through moyach shal talev, through his effort. And there's also levels. But the Rishonim is the opposite. They are b'reshus libam. Their hearts control them. Their desires control them. Their life is to follow their desires. Ve'ein libam b'reshusam klal, he says. Even stronger. Not just that their heart controls them. They never, ein libam b'reshusam klal, they don't have any control over their hearts' desires. This doesn't mean they cannot ever control their heart desires. We know that. But that's their state of being. And we're talking about a state of being. So what does it mean by Rasha be'emes? So there are different commentaries that discuss it. The Rebbe emphasizes Rasha be'emes means Rasha v'ralei. That what he said at the end of chapter 11. We said there's a Rasha v'tevlei and a Rasha v'ralei. Rasha be'emes means the true Rasha. Whereas he said in that language, end of chapter 11, Shatev shebenafshi nistaluk mikirbe ve'emet b'chinas makif alav nomayla. He's become so decadent and so immersed in his material pleasures, like an addict, that the good that's in him is not completely disappeared, but like hovers above him. It's not his personality. His personality is self-indulgence, hedonism, taking care of his own desires. So here's a person where you see he doesn't have control. Look at an addict, for example. Unless he does something, and we'll talk about, of course he can turn things around. But at this point, he's addicted to the world. He's addicted to his pleasures. So the idea of moyach shal talev, even moyach shal talev of a beini, doesn't apply to him. Because what applies to him? What controls his heart? The Rebbe explains, when he said Rasha be'emes, we learned earlier in chapter 13 that emes means something that is through and through emes. So emes can mean that he's either actually a Rasha v'ralei or he's a Rasha v'tevlei, but for all practical purposes, he's right on the edge of a Rasha v'ralei. Which means he may do good and it may be part of his life, but it's very easy, and his state of being is generally b'koyach. It just takes a little and it goes right into the world of taivas again. So we know in human beings, we can't fit everybody on the same level. There's so many variations. So he just explains that Rasha be'emes means that. So a Rasha in general follows his desires. But Rasha be'emes, the taivas have become so much his nature. It's a person who's become pashta bal taiva. So even if his mind says to him, it's not worthy, it's like think of someone who wants to lose weight. Even if you sincerely want to lose it, but you've become so habitual to you, it's impossible for you to stop yourself. So that's what we're talking about, Rasha be'emes. But we still have to understand, so how does Karev Elecha Dover Me'ed fit to him? So that we'll leave for the next week's class. So we'll stop here. Stop at Masayim B'Tev. That you'll see that even this type of Rasha can do tshuva. But for now, we'll stop and we'll continue next week. Everyone have a good Tavoch, and maybe Mamshech the power of your Shevat through the whole year and bring them good. Thank you.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit HasidusApplied.com for archived classes and more resources.